Greetings and welcome to Antagonist's Advocate. I am your host, David, and joining me this week is my dear friend, Zach.
Hello there. My name is Zach Rainstorm. I usually just go by Zach. I'm a longtime Star Wars fan. I've known the series since before I can remember, and I'm the treasurer of Star Wars Club here at the university.
And today, on this episode, we're going to be talking about Count Dooku, Darth Tyrannus, the Sith Lord from the Star Wars, not all three of the prequels, just the later two, Darth Maul's in the first one,
Yeah. Count Dooku's first appearance is, yes, in Attack of the Clones, where he kind of owns everybody that he meets along the way. And then he's briefly at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. He's seen in other stuff, but that's probably the stuff he's most well known from. Because that's the Christopher Lee one we get, which is,
Do you love a Christopher?
we do love good Christopher Lee stuff.
So, tell me a bit about Count Dooku. Who is he? What does he do?
So let's talk a little bit about eras first. So, in the prequels, we're in kind of there's not really a solid way to name that era. People usually use BBY to talk about time in that era. That stands for Before the Battle of Yavin, which is the final battle at the end of A New Hope. But before the time era of the prequels, there was a time of relative peace where there were no Sith. The Jedi were like beacons of hope and really legendary heroes during that time. And this was
period of general peace and prosperity.
Yeah, and the Jedi were kind of arbiters of that peace and prosperity. And Dooku was born at the tail end of that time. So he kind of grew up with that as kind of like the ideal of a Jedi. Jedi would come and help. If anyone's read Light of the Jedi, the book begins with there's a major catastrophe that threatens to hurt a lot of people, and so the Jedi show up and do their best to rescue everyone, risking themselves for the purpose of that. So that's kind of like where the Jedi started, kind of like right before Dooku's birth. So Dooku was born on the planet Sereno. He's actually, we'll explain a little more about this later actually, but Dooku was actually born the son of the Count and Countess of the planet Sereno. Therefore, by blood, royalty, and they were one of the richest families in the galaxy, actually.
Right, and that's why he is Count Dooku and not just your boy Dooku.
Yeah. Well, sort of. It gets a little complicated because when he's born and they find out that he's Force sensitive, his parents hate him. They don't like anything to do with the Jedi or the Force or anything like that. So they end up calling the Jedi Order and being like, take him away, we don't want him. But they're taking too long, so Dooku's father is like, okay, we'll throw him on the outside of the city, this infant in the snow without any clothes, where wolves could eat him. And then, the Jedi get there and save him. So that's kind of where he comes from.
All right.
Cool. Yeah, so he's then raised within the Order. He then meets then other Padawan Sifo Dyas, who becomes very important later.
Sifo Dyas.
Yes, the oft-mentioned Sifo Dyas, who we never really meet that much. The two of them were very close friends. They continue to bond over the years. They don't like following orders. They, again, are trying to live by these High Republic ideals that sometimes get lost in the modern time period. But anyway, at one point, Dooku ends up going back to Sereno with a couple of other Jedi, where he meets his sister and brother. He doesn't realize they're his sister and brother at the time. But it's there that he finds out, the circumstances of his arrival and joining of the Order.
How does he feel about that?
He's not happy about it. He honestly takes it pretty well.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. He's devastated by what his father did, but he's grateful for the fact that he got to meet his sister, Jens, I believe is her name. And the two of them actually end up like staying in communication for a while, something that he later gets in trouble for.
No attachments.
No attachments.
That tends to cause a lot of problems, that rule, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, anyway, so Sifo Dyas and Dooku continue to break rules because they want to do things the way they think they should be done and not the way they're being done. And the two of them end up, despite the fact that they're not good at following rules, they're two of the best Jedi of their time. Like, strongest, kindest, most compassionate. And then they end up being, claimed by their respective masters. Dooku wanted to be claimed by the master who ended up claiming Sifo Dyas because she studied, like, Sith artifacts and basically things outside the norm.
Ooh.
The same way that...
Forbidden lore.
Exactly. The same way that Dooku and Sifo Dyas were disruptors, she was as well. But she was well respected. However, Dooku was instead claimed by Master Yoda, which Dooku was at first confused about because Yoda's a very much by the book, by the rules sort of guy.
Yoda makes the rules.
Yeah, he's the Grand Master. Although at the time he's not Grand Master. He is on the Council, but not Grand Master of the Council. But Yoda basically says to him, "You're not good at following rules, but that doesn't mean you're not a powerful and great Jedi." But yeah, make a long story short, they continue to break rules even after knighthood and masterhood.
As you do.
Dooku continues to lose respect for the Jedi Council and really the Republic as life goes along because he sees the corruption that they've become complacent in, basically. Like, for anybody who's watched the Clone Wars especially, but it's kind of sprinkled everywhere, there are lots of things that are illegal that just kind of don't get governed because admittedly, it's kind of hard. It's hard for a country to govern itself. Now think about something that's governing not only a planet but hundreds of planets.
Right. Yeah.
But they've just become complacent. Slavery exists in a bunch of places. Lots of times senators use their power to just kind of gain wealth and influence, not really caring about their planets.
And the Jedi aren't doing anything about this because it's not their job and Dooku thinks it should be?
It depends on how you want to look at their job. Because basically, what the Jedi are doing during this time is they are maintaining the current system. So
instead of fixing it.
Instead of fixing the problems, they're keeping it exactly how it is. Which in some ways, they're keeping the positives positive, but they're also keeping the negatives negatives.
Right.
And
they're maintaining the status quo for better and worse.
Yes, better and worse is a great term for it. Dooku's not okay with that. He loses some respect. At one point, he ends up joining the Jedi Council. He was actually a member of the Council.
Rule breaker like him.
Eventually, he ends up finding out that after his father's death, he finds out that his brother Ramil has become the Count of Sereno, and he's continuing to exploit the planet. So Dooku goes there along with Sifo Dyas and Sifo Dyas' master, I believe. And they end up basically overthrowing Count Ramil, and that's where Dooku claims the title of Count.
Now, leading a coup doesn't quite seem like normal Jedi behavior.
No, they're not cool with that. They only come to... The Jedi end up coming to help after, the planet's resources are threatened, which just further upsets Dooku. And then...
They didn't come to help because there was wrong happening. They came to help because the money was drying up.
Right. And then after that, he kind of... Qui-Gon's death, which we see in The Phantom Menace. For a little bit of context, Qui-Gon Jinn was Count Dooku's apprentice. And so after Qui-Gon Jinn's death, for a mission that Dooku actually recommended he not go on, he was like, "No, I'm done. I am done." and he ended up helping Palpatine to, engineer the Clone Wars, and his hope was that this will lead to a better future, because his ultimate goal was overthrow the Jedi Council, because he saw that as kind of the root of all the problems, is that they're governing bodies of the Republic, and the Jedi Council were complacent in everything going on.
So he would overthrow them and replace them with himself and other like-minded individuals, or
kind of, yeah. He would, I don't know that he would specifically form like a new Jedi Order, but at this point he is the leader of an army. He is the leader of the planet Sereno. He's the count. He's the ruler of the planet right now.
Right.
The idea is that he and Palpatine would rule and lead to a better future, which wouldn't be allowed because they want to be, monarchs. That's the term I'm looking for. They would want to be monarchs, which the Jedi Council's not cool with. Because again, maintaining status quo, for better and worse.
Right. So he wants to put himself and also Palpatine. Does he know? See, he knows that Sidious is Palpatine, yeah?
Yes, he does. That's one of the things that he kind of struggles with along the way of his, where does he draw the line?
Right, yeah, does he think that Palpatine's a good person who's gonna bring good things, or is he planning to also kill Palpatine at the end of this, or?
So, to my knowledge, he at one point entertains the idea, but never really kind of plans for that. The thing is that's exactly the kind of corruption that he sees in the Jedi and the Republic that he doesn't want himself. So he tries to avoid that, but there's a part of him that entertains that idea, such to the point he ends up training multiple apprentices during the course of the Clone Wars,
which of course he's not allowed to do, but he does anyway. Because
of the rule of two.
He does a lot of things he's not allowed to do, time.
Yes, he does. He entertains the idea. He has Asajj Ventress as an apprentice for a time, and then later Savage Opress.
Wasn't he Ventress's apprentice?
Dooku?
No, Savage.
Savage. So yes, after he is Dooku's apprentice.
Right.
Savage is actually the apprentice of 3 different characters throughout the series.
Right, because he's also Maul's apprentice.
He's also Maul's apprentice.
At which point there are 5 Sith?
Technically, there are only 2, because the only person...
The others aren't technically Sith.
The only person who can name Sith is Palpatine, because he is the master. He's the only one who is a lord.
Well, but then there would be 3 Sith, because Darth Maul doesn't stop being a Sith.
Yeah, he does, because...
Palpatine thought he was dead, but would that make him not a Sith, or just not a living Sith?
Because he's unclaimed as his apprentice now. And if, throughout the series, Darth Maul doesn't go by Darth Maul anymore, it's just Maul. That's a specific line that he says in Star Wars Rebels later. Someone refers to him as Darth Maul, and he replies with, formerly Darth, now just Maul. And so Maul kind of views himself as a Sith master, which is why he takes Savage as an apprentice later. But Asajj Ventress, Savage Opress, and Maul, none of them are technically Sith because they're not named Sith. The same way that a Jedi who isn't knighted by other Jedi technically isn't a Jedi.
Right, okay.
People play with the technicalities.
They can still, use the Force and lightsabers and stuff. They're just not technically at that role. Right.
Spoilers for anyone who hasn't finished watching the Clone Wars. I apologize. But, Savage Opress ends up, Savage Opress dies, unfortunately, for him.
I was going to say, is that really unfortunate?
Maul ends up becoming basically a criminal kingpin, and then Asajj Ventress ends up an assassin. So they end up using their Force abilities for other things, but aren't technically Sith. But yeah, so in terms of Dooku, he questions, he continues to question Palpatine, but at this point he's kind of so blinded by how much he despises the Order and what it represents, that he's very focused on bringing that down. So I guess I would say he sees Palpatine as more of a lesser of two evils.
Right. He see the
Yeah.
Okay. He sees the man who wants to engineer a interplanetary war as the less evil than letting bad things happen on their own.
Well, because here's the other thing: is he knows he doesn't know Palpatine's full plan because Palpatine's a deceiver. That's what he is.
That's his whole thing. You don't get the title Darth Sidious by being open and upfront with your plans.
Yeah, but Dooku, he works with a lot of corrupt people who end up wanting money ultimately, or most of what the Separatists want. So he plays the part of the rich count.
Right.
But he knows that the plan is ultimately bring down and rebuild the Republic government, bring down the Jedi Order, bring down the corrupt businessmen who, drive the things like the slave trade, blockades, that sort of thing.
Right.
Which we do see Anakin carry out later on when he kills the Federation leaders on Mustafar. But yeah, no, Dooku is he's somewhat blinded by... He makes some decisions that he feels like he can't come back from, and it ends up pushing him into a dark place. If you watch Tales of the Jedi, he killed Master Yaddle in order to protect Palpatine's identity.
Right.
Because she could tell something was up and followed him, and ended up finding out about Darth Sidious and everything before they were ready for their plans. Yeah. The same way Sifo Dyas, there's been a lot of mystery around Sifo Dyas as a character, but as we've gotten more Count Dooku stuff,
because Sifo Dyas was the one who ordered the creation of the clone armies.
Correct.
Was that actually Sifo Dyas, or was
Yes.
that Dooku pretend? Okay.
Yeah.
So was he in on the plan, or did he just do that?
Sort of. So Dooku and Sifo Dyas remained friends after Dooku left the Order, and then when Palpatine says, "We're gonna need a Grand Army of the Republic," Dooku goes to his friend Sifo Dyas, who's still part of the Republic government, because Dooku's not anymore. He's the Count of Sereno, which I think technically falls under Republic governance, but doesn't have a senator or anything in the Senate. But basically, he goes to Sifo Dyas and he's like, "You should order this army to be built.
You should buy an army.
And yeah,
just trust me, dude. Don't ask why."
Well,
or
he manages to convince him.
You might need one.
Because remember, Sifo Dyas is similar to Dooku in that he doesn't have a high opinion of the Order, and he likes to disobey them. So he's
gonna be a little easier to convince to secretly order the creation of an army.
And the two of them have been best friends since before they became members.
Best buds.
So they continue to make he makes it as a contingency plan, basically. Only Sifo Dyas ends up finding out what it's really for, and Dooku hires somebody to kill him. That's how Sifo Dyas ends up dead.
Is that one of those decisions he feels like he can't come back from?
Right, yes.
Ordering the death of his best friend who...
Right. And he becomes increasingly colder as time goes on, to the point that Jenza, his sister, who is actually a very good person despite growing up in the family of terrible people that they had, begins to tell him that she can't recognize him anymore. She doesn't recognize the person he's become. And I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure at some point he ends up, because she's a threat to his control, ends up ordering her death as well.
Sacrifices must be made for the greater good.
Exactly. He continues to make sacrifices to the greater good, and at this point, he's basically killed everyone who's close to him, or everyone who's close to him has died.
Except for Sidious, who plans to kill him.
Right. Which always makes me laugh in that scene of Dooku's death, when Palpatine says, "Do it, kill him now," and Dooku just kind of looks at him like, "What?" When he could look at Anakin and be like, "He's the Sith Lord."
No. That's why Palpatine's like, "Do it now."
Yeah, do it. Kill him now.
Do it now before he reveals everything.
quickly now.
Yeah,
If you hesitate just a moment longer, all of my years and years of plans and all these deaths will be for absolutely nothing. Do it now.
Which, by the way, an absolutely A+ like acting moment for Christopher Lee. The moment that he looks at Palpatine, there's so much of like, what? After all of this that I've done for you, you're just gonna have him kill me right here. Yep. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the life of Count Dooku is one where he has tried to fix the corruption in the galaxy, but ultimately ended up creating some of his own. And you know,
he tries. He has noble intentions. He wants to remove corruption, to improve the galaxy, to help people to do good things, and then he keeps going on that, and he starts to like hate the Order, and then he does bad things for a good purpose, and then it doesn't work out like that.
It's the idea of like the ends justifies the means, only he doesn't make it to the end that he was looking for because he's killed before he can reach it.
That's usually that's the big problem with an ends justifies the means outlook, is if the ends do not end that way.
That being said, the thing about it this way. So we don't know exactly what the prophecy is. Divination as a thing, like prophecy, like all that sort of thing, is something that was banned by the Jedi a long time ago. So the prophecy they have is from a very, very long time ago.
Right, the prophecy of you'll bring balance to the Force. You was my brother, you the chosen one, that one.
Right. And the Jedi Master, only the High Council of the Jedi Order actually gets to know what the prophecy is.
And he was a member of the Council for a time.
Yes.
The Council and the High Council, those the same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Jedi High Council, Jedi Council, the Council, they're all kind of different names for the same thing, basically.
Depends on how much you want to abbreviate it.
Right. Yeah, Jedi High Council is kind of like the proper name. Mm-hmm. But usually people just say Jedi Council.
Right. So Dooku was told about was told what the prophecy is?
I don't actually know if he specifically knew it, but he had the means to know it at one point. Mm-hmm. So he may. And I don't know for certain. But ultimately, like, depending on how you want to look at it, Dooku is kind of instrumental in because thinking about like the original trilogy, and I won't get into the sequels because they kind of retcon things a little bit, so it doesn't fit quite as well. But the idea is that Anakin Skywalker is the chosen one, and that he'll bring balance to the Force. Mm-hmm. And balance does not mean equal number of Sith and equal number of Jedi necessarily.
Right.
The dark side of the Force is like it is a perversion of the Force. So inherently, by dark side stuff existing, that is an imbalance. Not saying that I necessarily agree, but like that's the rules that they've set through there. But so the idea is once the Sith are destroyed, when the Sith are no more, that brings balance. And so the idea was that it would be Anakin, but then at the end of Revenge of the Sith, he becomes a Sith himself.
Right.
Only in the end, as he's dying, he kills Palpatine to defend Luke Skywalker again.
Right.
Sorry, spoilers if you guys haven't seen the original
trilogy.
Spoilers
if you haven't seen the original Star Wars trilogy.
Ultimately, therefore, bringing balance to the Force, because it is not Luke Skywalker
dies in the process, since he was also Sith at the time.
And just to look a little bit at lineage here, right? Anakin Skywalker is very well known for going against the Jedi Order. Yep. It's like a big thing.
And he was trained by Obi-Wan, who was trained by Qui-Gon, who was trained by Dooku.
And Dooku is the one who started that, because his master was Yoda, who does everything by the book.
Of that.
So any time that Anakin is going against the Order,
it's an inherited trait from Dooku.
It came down from Dooku. Like, I mean, there's part of it that is just Anakin himself. Because,
through 4 layers of master apprentice.
Yeah.
It's not
Anakin,
quite so direct, but...
Yeah, and Anakin, he also had the problem of he was trained much later than most Jedi are. Like, Dooku was trained from since before he can remember, and that's the same for...
It's part of why he's so good.
Most Jedi. Yeah, and like Obi-Wan has like very few memories of his family before We find out, like, in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, he remembers that he had a brother, but he doesn't remember anything beyond that. So, there's that also of his anger and stuff like that makes him more likely to go against the grain. But he learned that from Obi-Wan, who learned it from Qui-Gon, who learned it from Dooku.
Right. And he was definitely, he was instrumental in bringing things about such that they happen as they do, obviously.
Yeah. Like, if the Clone Wars hadn't happened, how they happened, it's quite possible Anakin wouldn't have killed Palpatine.
Right. If the Clone Wars don't happen like they happen, Anakin doesn't become Vader, doesn't get onto the Death Star and all that.
Yep.
But I mean, if the that'd be a pretty big change if the Empire doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah. And I will say one thing also is Empire.
Why did Dooku think they needed a clone army? How did Palpatine convince him of that? It feels like it would be a lot easier if they just had the droid army and then they just win the war.
Well, because they didn't want the Separatists to win. They wanted a breakdown of the current government and then a rebuilding of it. Because, again, talking about the Separatists, is their whole group are the kind of people that Dooku despises. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody, Wat Tambor, Newt Gunray, like the Galactic Banking Clan, all of them are the kind of people that Dooku thinks the world would be better off without. Mm-hmm. But they were instrumental because it was them that basically helped to break down the current world order and also kept the Jedi distracted so that Palpatine could take control. Because
they had the money and power needed to build a droid army.
Right.
And if there wasn't a war going, the war happening contributes to breakdown of order.
Yeah, because if the if the Clone Wars, or if the Trade Federation had not, because the Clone Wars don't start in the Phantom Menace, they start in Attack of the Clones.
Right.
But the seeds are sown for it in the Phantom Menace with the blockade of Naboo, which was something that Palpatine convinced Newt Gunray to do. Mm-hmm. Now, Palpatine was not the Chancellor at that time. He was the Naboo Senator. Right. And I believe the current Chancellor resigns, if I'm not mistaken, because of how poorly the situation with the Naboo blockade was handled. Mm-hmm. And it's not like a voluntary resignation. It's more of a
vote of no confidence kind of resignation.
Yeah, I don't remember if they actually go fully to like vote of no confidence, but just everybody wanted him out.
Given the opportunity to resign, I suggest you take it.
I don't remember which one it is, but I know like they wanted him out, and that's why he left. Which then brings Palpatine
seat for Palpatine
as Chancellor, which is also where we get the meme of a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Just a little aside. But then, without the war, Chancellor Palpatine would not have been granted his emergency powers that then gain him much more control over what's happening. Mm-hmm.
Which is what he needs to later become emperor and stuff.
Because under ordinary circumstances, he doesn't have the powers to do that. Mm-hmm. And so, attaining that power to then break everything down and rebuild it.
Right. So he tells Dooku that he needs that power to bring about their plans to break things down and rebuild them, when actually he needs it for his plans.
Exactly.
Okay. Thus Dooku is deceived.
Exactly. Ultimately, Palpatine is a perfect deceiver, a manipulator. He tells Dooku what he wants to hear. We don't really get to see that, unfortunately, that much. But in... we get to see pretty strongly throughout the series, Palpatine knows exactly what it is that Anakin wants and tells him what he wants to hear. Mm-hmm. We also see with Anakin, I don't remember if they ever state it in the movies, but Anakin's dreams are caused by Palpatine. His dreams that he sees, his mother dying, his wife dying, those are put there in his mind by Palpatine, so he can further make that fear stronger. And I don't remember if it's ever stated, but I imagine he could do something similar with Dooku.
Mm-hmm.
Palpatine's not the strongest in like lightsaber combat or anything. Not to say that he's bad. He handles Savage Opress and Darth Maul 2-on-1 and handles
them. He's still a Sith Lord. He's not exactly a pushover.
Right. But his greatest strength is manipulation of the Force, people, and planning. Such to the point that, like, part of the reason why the Jedi Order do such a bad job of handling the fact is there's so many clues that Palpatine is the Sith Lord they're talking about.
But he obfuscates their divination.
Right. And all that. Like, they know that the dark side of the Force is around the Chancellor. They straight up say that in Revenge of the Sith. Like, something weird is going on with the Chancellor. Little fun fact about Palpatine's office. So many of the, like, ornamental items in his office are Sith artifacts, which should be a huge red flag to the Jedi Council. Several key members of which are in there on a regular basis, but they don't pay attention to that.
Notice? I think they're cute little curios. Nothing to worry about.
Canonically, Palpatine uses an ability that is basically shrouding himself and making others inactive. That's also why he's able to, again, as someone who is a pretty good lightsaber fighter, but not great, able to take out 4 council members by himself. Well, 3 council members. Although the only reason he starts to lose to Mace Windu is so he can look pitiful for Anakin later. Mm-hmm. That's a very intentional choice. He knew Anakin was coming. Because again, foresight is his greatest strength.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So Count Dooku, he had good intentions, wanted to make the galaxy make the galaxy a better place, improve the lives of people, and by tearing down a corrupt system.
Right.
But it doesn't work out that way because he is largely because he's been deceived. He's been lied to pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
By Palpatine, who's really orchestrating all of this for his own ends.
And I mean, it depends on how you want to look at it, because, again, like we talked about, Dooku's actions eventually lead to the destruction of the Sith, depending on how granular you want to look at it.
That is eventually destroying the active order so a new one can be built.
Not the way he intended.
Mm-hmm. That's a long way down the line from his life and actions.
So it depends, because he didn't meet his intention, but he kind of helped. Kind of eventually helped. And again, the formation of the Empire was terrible for a lot of people, but there were also a lot of worlds who prospered under it. The problem was the inner worlds got a lot of attention, a lot of help and stuff, and the outer worlds got ignored for the most part. And, places became lawless. A lot of people would probably point to Tatooine as a great example. That one's not entirely true, because doesn't fall under the Republic's jurisdiction technically. It belongs to the Hutts. But there are other planets that we don't see like as often or clearly. But Ord Mantell, which we see, and I believe we see Ord Mantell in Kenobi. We see it in the Bad Batch. Places that are lawless, and
sounds like pretty much the opposite of what he wanted.
Right. So what ended up happening is a lot of places got helped, but a lot of places ended up worse. So, depending on how you want to look at it, I mean, it's kind of balanced. But the Empire was good for some people, just not for everybody. Which is also why a lot of that went unknown, is because the people who had power, who were in the middle, didn't know everything that was going on in the Outer Rim stuff, because they were all taken care of.
Right.
And yeah, financially, don't ask me how, because the Death Star should have been a really expensive project. Financially, the Empire did much better than the Republic, and the Empire also had a stronger grasp on things.
Thanks to the powers of authoritarianism.
Yeah. Thanks to that, everything was more strongly governed.
Perks.
Right. So, laws were better upheld in some places, but at the same time, freedom was lost. And so, like, the idea of balance, it really needed to be somewhere between the Republic and the Empire, because something about the Republic is its grasp on everything is very
Pretty
weak.
tenuous,
They don't have soldiers, really. I mean, they make a galactic army of the Republic, like, that's a new thing. And, like, they're so desperate for it that they don't question where this secret army came from.
Ooh.
You know?
Oh, we have an army. Thanks, Sifo Diaz.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll
That is-
just use this and not worry about it.
That ends up leading to some bad blood between the Jedi and the
Kaminoans?
the Republic.
Ah.
You know, the Senate, because it's like, who ordered this? Who approved this? You know, because the Jedi, as much as involved as they are, they're technically not in charge of any government stuff, or at least they're not supposed to be.
But one of the Jedi ordered that army. And
Right.
then after that, the Jedi become generals in the army. That's why
Right.
it's General Kenobi and General Skywalker.
Exactly.
Just could kind of be seen as a bit of a power grab in a way.
Yeah, and that's ultimately, and like that's again another part of the plan, because General Order 66 or just Order 66 is basically, it is a rule that if the Jedi had read the handbook, they would have seen that was a thing that exists. You know, there are other general orders. We don't get to know them, unfortunately. I think we get to know a couple others, but I don't know specifically. But Order 66 is basically orders the troopers of the Galactic Republic, and it's not even specific to clone troopers, to turn on the Jedi for having committed treason, like a power grab or something, which is part of what the power of the line by Sidious of it's treason then is.
Treason, then.
Yeah, because he now has exactly what he needed, because it's been very suspicious of the Jedi ordered an army, then the Jedi appointed themselves the generals of said army, then the Jedi go to the Chancellor and try to arrest or assassinate him. You know?
Because he's evil.
Right.
He's got
You know,
the
because
dark
he's evil.
side because of their crazy superstition. That's why.
and
Yeah,
then-
that does look pretty bad when you put it to the Senate that way.
Right, yeah. From the Senate's perspective, this is what they're seeing, you know?
Massive.
Which is why a lot of people were okay when the Jedi were killed and saw them as traitors, is because that's what General Order 66 was. It was the execution of traitors. And a lot of people were already kind of fed up with the Jedi exerting their will where they wanted, despite the fact that they technically aren't a governing body. You know, think of it like, you know, the equivalent would be a church of some sort being like, hey, we're going to appoint ourselves the generals of your army.
Right, because they're not, like, elected by the people of the Republic. They're not, you know, they make
Right.
their own power.
Right. Exactly. No, they're, like, all of their workings, the way their organization is built, is all done within them. Like, there is no governing body over the Jedi. And the Jedi shouldn't be a governing body, but they exert their force on other people.
Their force.
Yeah.
All right.
Which, again, is part of Dooku's issue
Part
with
of
them.
one of Dooku's many problems with the Jedi Order.
Yeah, I want to read this really great. This is a really good Dooku quote about Yoda. Hold on, I have it pulled up here. Here we go. So this is Dooku talking to Darth Sidious. He says, the Jedi Order's problem is Yoda. No being can wield that kind of power for centuries without becoming complacent at best or corrupt at worst. He has no idea that it's overtaken him. He no longer sees all the little cumulative evils that the Republic tolerates and fosters, from slavery to endless wars, and he never asks, why are we not acting to stop this? Live alongside corruption for too long, and you no longer notice the stench. The Jedi cannot help the slaves of Tatooine, but they can help the slave masters.
That's a good quote.
Yeah.
It's a good quote. It's also just a nice little bit of foreshadowing of, well, I mean, I guess Palpatine's already corrupt, so.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good quote.
Yeah, that really kind of sums up Dooku's mission statement there. And I guess it also kind of colors his story as well, of he thinks that, like, he starts to think that he's beyond that as well, but he also starts to not notice the stench of corruption around him and in him as well.
and because he also gets a lot of power, and he becomes a separatist warlord.
And he becomes so
does a
focused
bit of
on
evil,
war.
does a bit of war crimes.
Yeah, it is kind of funny though watching the Clone Wars.
They do a lot of war crimes.
Well, I was gonna say in the Clone Wars we see him like stressing a lot about like when the separatists lose battles, and I'm like, dude, you do realize that this is all like.
This is, in fact,
like
plan.
Yeah, this is the plan. Like, this is exactly what the plan is.
But is he actually stressed about them, or is he just pretending to be?
It's kids show stuff.
He has to look. Well, that's true.
It's just kids show stuff. Because to say the Clone Wars is a kids show is a little bit of a disservice and not entirely true because there's a lot of war crimes, assassination, slave trade,
bit of terrorism,
drug
bit of
trafficking,
I think, actual genocide,
terrorism, straight up genocide on multiple occasions actually. Yeah. But in terms of the way it's written, it is still written as a kid's show. So you need a little bit of simpler of like good guys win good guys win at the end of the episode. Bad guys upset because they're losing. So. It's like in no disrespect in any way because I love cartoons, but it's a cartoonification a little bit of the events. If you were to do something live action, it would end up slightly different because that's just how the media work.
All right. So, I think it's time for our 3 questions. Let's decide if we can. Is Count Dooku wrong? Is he a villain? Is he evil? Let's start. Is he wrong?
Is he wrong? Is he evil? Is he a villain?
Yeah. Sounds like he's not really wrong.
No. I mean, the story pretty, it's as close to straight up saying that he's right as it can be, I feel like. Mm-hmm. And I would agree with him. There's so much corruption in the Republic, in the Jedi, that it really needs to not necessarily be destroyed, but it needs some serious help.
Some major reformation. His ideas are right.
Absolutely.
Methods, maybe not so much.
Right, yeah. And, we see that of, him trying to help as a Jedi, and then, as life goes on, he just gets more and more extreme in his methods, such to the point of, assassinating close friends and family.
Yeah, that does get a bit villainous there. Is he a villain?
I mean, so depending on how you want to look at villain, I mean, I would say yes. I think
so.
He's a hero for some people. He does well for the people of Sereno. Sereno prospers and does pretty well under his guidance. But ultimately, he has engineered a war that hurt a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people die in wars, and
a lot of people.
The soldiers are all droids and clones, both of whom are sapient and
sentient,
are people, but are not the same as normal people.
And I mean,
but also a bunch of normal people also die.
Completely ignoring the idea of war. I mean, the clone army is created. They are people created without agency. Mm-hmm. And if they try to choose agency, they're reprimanded or terminated.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is a serious ethical problem.
More or less ethical than the
droid army. Depends on how you want to look at it. The droid army.
That's gonna get into all sorts of questions.
Yeah, this gets into deep philosophical stuff. The droid army is admittedly not as high functioning, brain wise, but at the same time they do have personality. They do experience fear and stuff.
Not as smart as a clone, but is still a person.
Right. The same way that there are some species in Star Wars that are less intelligent than others. That doesn't mean that they're not sentient and don't deserve to live. Mm-hmm. C-3PO, for example, has the relative intelligence of a regular human being. Droids are less intelligent than a human. Battle droids are less intelligent than human beings, but they're definitely more intelligent than dogs or something.
Are programmed to feel pain.
It's debatable whether they feel pain, but they definitely feel fear and anxiety.
They will flee for their lives.
Except for maybe B2s. B2s are especially low functioning.
Right, B2s are the big gray. Yeah, they don't
yeah.
feel shit.
No, yeah, the B2 battle droids were like, they're basically a walking turret is what they are. They're quite like low functioning.
Enhanced beef at the cost of brain.
It also depends what point in the war you're talking about. Because in the Phantom Menace, they're all operated by like a hive like mind thing. And then when that bites them in the butt, you know, because they blow up the command ship and then all of the droids stop working, they end up, you know, giving them all their own like mind computer basically. And then they also have tactical droids that are much more intelligent,
much smarter,
that give them orders.
And then later the super tactical droids with the chin.
Yeah.
They're
but ultimately, they gave them agency. So, like, just the creation of the armies is problematic in and of itself. And then it leads to the creation of an empire that is great for some people, but
does a lot of
oppresses a lot of others.
It explodes a few planets.
Yeah. And ultimately, he helps Sith ascend to power. And so, you know,
which is kind of his intention, because he was a Sith and was trying to ascend himself to power.
The Sith just isn't doing what he thought he was going to do, but ultimately his acts, I think, have a more of a net negative than a net positive, which makes him more villainous than anything else.
A villain, yes. But is he evil?
Evil? I would not say so. No. Dooku, you know, he does evil things, but there's nothing inherently in him that wants to hurt people. It is, in fact, the exact opposite. The problem is
he's always trying to
lost. Yeah.
The overarching goal is always a good thing.
Right.
Does he you say he tries to do good and like help things while he's still a member of the Order, and it doesn't work, and he isn't able to affect the kind of change he feels he needs to, and then he goes off on his own and becomes a Sith Lord and starts trying to affect change that way.
Right. And he, you know, as much as he does a lot of terrible things, the one thing that I think is interesting to note is a lot of characters in Star Wars prefer to do things themselves. The assassinations that he has to carry out, he always delegates to someone else. He was ordered by Palpatine to try to kill Padme. He hires Jango Fett to do that.
Right, he sends someone to kill Sifo Dyas.
Right, he has to kill Sifo Dyas. He sends
rather
than
than just going and killing them himself.
Because it's not because he's not capable.
Right,
because
he's very capable.
Dooku is almost undefeated. The only duel that I can think of that Dooku actually loses is the one where he dies.
The Sith, where he dies.
Yeah,
and part of that is because he's like old at that point, isn't he?
Yeah, I like that doesn't have a huge effect. The problem is more so just Anakin's hyper powerful, and
he's the chosen one.
Yeah, but like I mean, Dooku even succeeds in fighting when at one point Asajj Ventress and Savage Opress try to kill him.
Right, they team up on him.
Right,
beats them both.
She shoots him with like a knockout dart that puts him like half asleep, and he is still able to defeat them in a duel. It's a 2v1 with him drugged, and he still wins.
He still wins.
Yeah,
he's really good.
He is a very skilled sword fighter, so he could do all these things. That's part of his
thing is that he puts a lot of training into being really good at fighting.
Right,
because that's one of the ways in which the Jedi have grown complacent.
Right. Yeah, that is actually one thing that he says is like, the Jedi's like their ability to fight is sloppy and stuff like that. If we need to help people, you guys can't.
Foreshadowing when they can't fight him.
Yeah.
If you ever need to fight a dangerous enemy, you'll lose. Allow me to demonstrate.
And you know, we didn't get to see whether this would happen or not because he was dead by the time, you know, the Trade Federation's leaders were killed. But I suspect he would have also sent someone else to do that, despite the fact that he could easily do that himself. And I think that comes from the fact that he doesn't want to hurt people and doesn't want to watch people suffering.
And he doesn't enjoy it. He's not.
Yeah, not that he's not willing to do it. He has out of anger.
He's willing to do a lot of evil things.
Yeah.
He's hardened and grown cold in that way, but he's still not cruel. He's not. Right. He takes no joy in it.
Exactly.
So he's not a good person.
No, he's not a good person, but he's not an evil person
Not
either.
evil either.
Evil in the definition of hurting people because that's the goal or that's what you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going by actions, I would say that his actions have again, talking about whether he's a villain or not, he has a greater net evil than net good.
Right. He does a lot of evil, but it doesn't feel evil.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to say it. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I can agree with that. All right. Well, that's our thoughts on it. But if you have your own opinions, please join us in our discussion. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I think that's all we needed to discuss for today.
Yeah, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. One of the things I love about Star Wars is how endlessly debatable it is.
Oh.
I do ask you guys, be nice to other people. There's some pretty bad gatekeeping in this community. Everyone's welcome to their own opinions. You know, I tried to steer away a little bit from like sequels and stuff like that because I know that's a controversial topic.
Yeah.
But please respect other people's opinions when you're discussing stuff.
Yeah, please be good to each other, be kind, be civil, be nice. But talk, discuss, comment. And of course, like, subscribe, join us next week, all of that. Yeah. Thank you, Zach, for
My
your
pleasure,
time
man.
and for your expertise. It's been
Absolutely.
delightful to have you on.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I love talking about this stuff, you know.
All right. Well, we'll catch you next time on Antagonist's Advocate.
And may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you, always.
Greetings. I am Lord Rakana, Prince of the Mesaraic Empire. I'm here to negotiate.
Matthew James, President of the United Nations.
Good to meet you.
And you as well. What can I do for you, Prince? Sorry, what was it again?
Prince Rakana.
Arcana. What can I do for you?
I'm here to negotiate the integration of this planet, of which I'm given to understand you're the closest thing you have to a leader, into the Mesaraic Empire. With me, I bring all the benefits of imperial citizenship, our technology, our medicine, the protection of our fleet, of course, and in return, all I require is your allegiance and a simple tithe, be it resources, minerals, agricultural products, willing and able bodies to serve in the war efforts, whatever your world can and will provide.
As President of the UN, I don't control this planet.
But you have great influence, yes?
I am here to regulate the relations between countries. However, I don't think that there are many of them that will willingly accept this. Here's the thing. We like our freedom, just as a species in general. This is why we have our own separate nations instead of one large nation.
Your people have an independent spirit, so to speak.
Yes. And you see how this causes a problem.
Of course, I see. I perhaps should be more clear. This is not an offer I am making. The Empire requires this world, and while I would be very happy, most happy, to arrange this peacefully without any needless bloodshed, for I do dislike pointless violence, I am perfectly willing to take this world, and able, I should add, to take this world by force. Now, I sincerely hope that with your position, you can convince some people, we can make arrangements. But I do warn you that if we are unable to resolve this peacefully, we will resolve it violently. Now, I'm sure you'll need some time to think, to plan,